Hello, everyone, and welcome to this live premiere edition of my new CMR TV show, Finding Our Freedom. I want to first thank Ms. Sandra Hill and the CMR TV team for inviting me to share this platform and for making this happen. I really, really appreciate your support. Thank you. This show is going to be about the positive political and socioeconomic change we need to see in the Caribbean and how to make it happen. The title for this show, Finding Our Freedom, is based on Nobel laureate development economist Amartya Sen's definition of socioeconomic development as the progressive removal of various unfreedoms. He suggests that freedom is constitutive of socioeconomic development, which is what we all want, what we all need, and what we all deserve. Freedom comes from self-sufficiency, so we will be exploring the ways in which we as Caribbean people can secure greater levels of freedom via strengthening our self-sufficiency on an individual and collective level. Freedoms also require and depend on everyone taking responsibility. So we will explore the ways in which we as Caribbean people can live more responsibly and can hold our leaders to account for delivering on their responsibilities. On this episode today, we discuss Jamaica. When Hurricane Melissa hit Jamaica on October 28th, it did not strike a fragile country. Jamaica had been delivering its strongest economic and social outcomes in generations. Years of fiscal discipline were finally paying off. Then the storm arrived and erased hard-won progress for families and businesses that had followed every rule that policymakers advocated to put the economy on a path to progress. The real injustice is that countries like Jamaica keep paying for shocks that its people did not cause. But we believe Jamaica holds strengths and creates room for new choices and triumphant outcomes. So joining me for today's inaugural episode of Finding Our Freedom from Jamaica is Dr. Damien King, the Managing Director of CAPRI, the Caribbean Policy Research Institute in Jamaica. And for full disclosure, I would share that I'm on the board of directors of CAPRI, and I'm very proud of the work that they do in driving evidence-based policymaking in Jamaica. Welcome, Damien.
Thank you very much. It's a thrill to be here.
I also have joining us today, Mr. Isaac Anthony, the CEO of CCRIF SPC, the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility, which made its largest payout ever in its history to Jamaica recently. Welcome, Isaac.
Thank you, Marla, and let me extend warm greetings to all our viewers, and also take the opportunity to really thank you for really the privilege of being on your first show.
Thank you. Thanks for joining me both. I'm very grateful that you're here. So let's get right into the discussions, gentlemen. Starting with you, Damien. Can you just give us the lay of the land in Jamaica at the moment, please? Like, how have people been affected, the cost of the damage, etc.? It looks like Damien is frozen for me.
You know, I love the way that you started this conversation by framing it within the context of Jamaica's just checking that I'm back. Yeah, I love the way you started this by framing it in the context of Jamaica's incredible fiscal improvements over the last 10 years. And it is significant and symbolic of that fact that yesterday, 3 weeks after Jamaica was impacted by the most devastating hurricane landfall in the Caribbean, that Fitch raised Jamaica's economic outlook from stable to positive. And in that context, the amount of damage that was done was, eye-popping. So just to give you an idea, there have been many estimates of the degree of physical damage, never mind damage to the economy. There are two things that happen when a hurricane hits. You lose physical capital, your economic infrastructure, your homes, your business structures, the built environment.
Yes.
You have a loss of economic activity, which is more ongoing. So just the first part, which is the loss of the built infrastructure, the built environment, the most credible estimate so far is $8 billion worth of damage.
Wow.
And, you can get into the granularity by pointing out that so many of the services that people need after a disaster are not available. Hospitals have been flattened. Public services cannot be delivered. Schools have been destroyed. So education cannot continue. Whole towns have had every building impacted. There are two communities that, 3 to 4 weeks after the hurricane are still isolated, and you can only get to by helicopter.
My goodness. Which communities are these?
I don't know the names of the communities, so I'm just dealing with it from the level of numbers.
Right.
1.6 million people affected in some way. That's that's more than half the population.
Wow.
Just on and on.
I saw around
lost to a third of the island.
Yes, I saw around 30,000 people in shelters, meaning homeless.
Yep.
That's staggering.
So it is staggering and fortunate. And again, this must give us a sense of the degree of vulnerability that we're exposed to in the Caribbean. Because Jamaica is fortunate and unusual that this hurricane largely affected only half of the island.
Right.
In the Caribbean, what we're accustomed to is the hurricane doesn't hit a part of your country, like a hurricane hits New Orleans or it hits Miami. It hits the country.
Yeah.
And there is no functioning other part of the country to provide relief to the impacted part.
Yes.
I was lucky in that respect that the eastern half of the island was relatively spared. And so services could be drawn from that and fiscal resources drawn from that to support the other half. And even then, the impact is massive, relatively and absolutely.
So you mentioned around 8 billion US is the estimate right now so far. Of course, this figure is subject to change, but around 8 billion US dollars in financing. In the damages, in the cost of damages. I'll bring Isaac in to talk about the payout that CCRIF made to Jamaica. But I would want to get a sense of what is the gap we're trying to fill, because there's some funding that Jamaica would have received, but then we have $8 billion so far that we're looking at in terms of damages. Do you have a sense of that number, Damien?
Well, so there's been a lot of financial support coming in. Jamaica issued a catastrophe bond a few years ago, which paid out. We have the Caribbean facility that Isaac is responsible for.
Yes.
And we have had donations from 2-3 dozen countries. And if you add up all of that in financial terms, I'm not talking about contributions now in kind, countries have sent generators and food packages.
I think we lost Damien.
Yeah. If you add up all of the financial resources that have been made immediately available, it generously comes to $500 million.
$500 million against 8 billion. Um,
So
yeah,
so compare $500 million available to an $8 billion loss.
yeah.
So there's the gap for you.
Thank you,
And
Damien.
when you do all of that,
Mhm.
Jamaica has put itself with all of these facilities and with CCRIF available and with the cat bond in a strong fiscal position relative to other countries in the Caribbean. And even
Absolutely.
then, it comes to about 5% of what we need.
5%. So thanks for that context, Damien. Isaac, let me bring you in here. And before we get to the numbers, could you just explain for the purpose of our audience, how does CRIF work?
Right. Thank you, Marla. So, before I actually answer the question directly, I think it's important for us to, for me at least, to give some background about how CRIF as a facility came to be established. Um, and the truth is, it was always known that the Caribbean is considered one of the most disaster-prone regions of the world. But it was really not until Hurricane Ivan in the year 2004 that governments started paying attention or serious attention to the whole issue of disaster risk financing. In other words, how you finance disaster risk. I think I think we can all agree that the impact of Hurricane Ivan, particularly on Grenada and to a certain extent the Cayman Islands, it was just too severe to ignore. And so the heads of government convened an extraordinary meeting of CARICOM, heads of government meeting, essentially to determine how to address the issue. And so they sought the technical assistance of the World Bank, and with the support of the donor community, came to establish what was then known as the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility. And just to say that, we started operating in the year 2007 with 16 member governments, and as the world's first multi-country risk pool based on parametric insurance. Now, parametric insurance is used, and I think it is important for our viewers to understand that it was not just the normal insurance company or the standard insurance company that was established. The facility was established to be able to pay quick or to provide quick liquidity to members. And of course, as you know, we have consistently paid within 14 days of the event,
Mm-hmm.
as we have done in the case of Jamaica. But why do we really pay quickly? And that is because we really, unlike what you call traditional indemnity insurance, which actually can take, which requires a detailed assessment of losses after an event, and which can take many months.
Mm-hmm.
It utilizes parametric insurance, which uses what you call predefined triggers to make an estimate of the losses and the related payouts. And when I talk about triggers, we're referring to, for example, in the case of hurricanes, wind intensity. In the case of, let's say, excess rainfall, which is one of the products that we offer, we use volume of rain, and earthquake, we use ground shaking. CRIF started with products when it started in 2007. We were offering products for earthquake as well as tropical cyclone. And now we have actually expanded our offering to excess rainfall, to fluvial floods, to fisheries, even electric utilities and water utilities. And I'm hopeful that the Jamaica will avail itself of some of those products. The other point that I want to make is that since we came into existence, the coverage that we offer our members is actually almost tripled from $500 million in the year 2007 to 2025, where we're offering or we're providing about $1.44 billion in cover. We've made 82 payouts totaling $483 million. And as I indicated, all those payouts are made within a period of 14 days of the event. So the whole idea is to provide quick liquidity to the countries to support the recovery process.
Could I just interrupt you there, Isaac? You said 1.44 billion as the coverage, meaning all of the countries that you have given coverage to, sold coverage to, the total amount of risk you're covering is 1.4 billion?
That is correct. That is
Okay.
for the current policy year. And I
Okay.
should quickly add that includes Central American countries, because you may be aware that CRIF has actually expanded into Central America. We do have 4 countries that are part of CRIF from that region.
Fantastic. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So this is how CRIF works, right? So when a disaster strikes, be it, as you said, a certain amount of shaking of the ground, if it's an earthquake, or a certain amount of rainfall, a certain amount of wind speed, once that disaster hits, it doesn't matter that an assessment of damage isn't done yet. You just pay out.
Correct.
Based on whatever the coverage is that this country would be entitled to.
Correct. So we have to, so each country purchases coverage from CRIF. They have their own policies, and the country can decide, for example, what type of policy that it wishes to purchase. So it would make decisions, for example, with respect to what you call the attachment point, or what we probably know better as the deductible. In other words, at what point, at what threshold the country would want the policy to trigger.
Right.
There's also, what you call the ceding percentage, which is the amount of risk that the countries transfer to the CRIF. And I must make the point as well that CRIF is really an insurance vehicle that pools risk, right, from across the region. And then we in turn retain some of that risk while we offload a significant portion of it on the what you call the international reinsurance market.
Right.
So it's not only CRIF just retaining all that risk. Otherwise, a few payouts, would have obviously undermined CRIF. And that is one of the reasons, why, CRIF still remains very strong even after it has made those payouts, because that risk is shared between CRIF and the reinsurance market. So, for example, the payouts that we would have made to Jamaica, a bit more of it would have been settled by the reinsurance market.
Right, and that was your biggest payout. Sorry,
if I can,
you go ahead, Damien.
No, I wanted to jump in and just make 2 points. I mean, that reinsurance aspect is really important, because it is not unheard of for one hurricane to take out 2 or 3 islands at the same time.
Yes.
And so you have to have that capacity. But a more important point was made by Mr. Anthony that I would like to emphasize, which is the speed of the payout. As he correctly points out, the disaster is happening. People are homeless. Facilities are cut off, and governments need the money in a hurry. So the fact that they have been able to structure instruments in a way that there are objective criteria that determine, if a payout is necessary. And I want to add to that Jamaica's now, well-known catastrophe bond that it got through the World Bank works in exactly the same way. That it divides the island geographically into zones, into segments. And the barometric pressure is identified in each of those segments. So the amount of the payout is determined by how many segments, how many geographical segments, barometric pressure is below the threshold.
Right.
And then the money is paid out automatically. So that speed of response is really important when you have a big disaster.
And that's called parametric, where you're not waiting on a disaster.
Barometric pressure.
Barometric, and then parametric in terms of the insurance vehicle.
Right.
I mean, this is all very encouraging, and I hope that governments in other countries are paying attention. If they don't already have these kinds of instruments in place, now is a good time to start paying attention and thinking about putting these in place. But I want to ask both of you, starting, Isaac, you first. You made this your biggest payout ever to Jamaica, and it's a historic achievement for you, and the way that this has been managed for Jamaica, it's again also sort of exemplary, as Damien just highlighted. What in your mind would you have liked to see done differently or better?
Right. So first of all, let me say that when we make payouts in CRIF, when I say we, I'm really referring to the wider CRIF team, the board,
Right.
the management, the staff, the service providers. Generally we celebrate payouts because,
Absolutely.
maybe unlike the traditional insurance companies, we want to make sure, because we were really set up for our member countries to
Right.
make
You all are
sure
not
that
set
we
up to
receive
make
that support.
Isaac and his team rich.
Yeah, that's exactly the point. We are really there, to help the countries to ensure that they receive the support that they require. And it is for that reason that we operate akin to a not-for-profit.
Right.
All the value, all the residual value of CRIF really goes back to the countries. But while we were pleased to make that payout to the government, I think, of Jamaica, I will say on this occasion, for me, we saw it, at least I saw it as a very sobering moment, a sad moment, to see a country, as you pointed out, Marla, that seemed to have done everything right in
Yeah.
terms of its macroeconomic fundamentals,
Yeah.
right? And then just one major hurricane event just seemed to have rolled back years of progress.
Yeah.
For me, that is a very sad moment. Notwithstanding, we're obviously very happy to make the payout. But one of the things I would also say, that I've been very consistent in saying that Jamaica has led in disaster risk financing in terms of the adoption of what we call the layering approach. And while, no country, including Jamaica, would ever have wanted to have to face with anything like a Hurricane Melissa, Jamaica prepared itself for that possibility through the pre-arranged financing instruments such as the CRIF insurance, as well as the CAT bond and so on. But like anything else, there's always additional things that we can do. There's always room for improvements. One of the things that I am hoping now is that the government will seek to optimize those financial instruments like CRIF on the existing products. So, for example, we can provide, as in CRIF, up to $150 million of cover per peril per country. So, in other words, if the government, and this is not intended to put the government authorities under any pressure, because of course these things cost money. You have to pay for coverage, and of course it opens up this big discussion about who is going to pay.
Yes.
What is the support that is coming from the international community?
Yes.
What support should be coming from the big polluters and so on? The reality is that we can offer up to $150 million per peril per country, for whether it be tropical cyclone, whether it be excess rainfall or earthquake. And so we have that opportunity to scale up even more. The other point that I want to make, Marla, is CRIF currently has other products that are more sector specific. So, for example, we have a product that has been developed for the fishery sector, and we see how vulnerable that sector can be. And we saw it firsthand in the case of Jamaica, how people's lives and livelihoods have been disrupted.
Yeah.
So we think this is a product that the government can avail itself to. We also have product for both electric utilities as well as water utilities. And I heard in a previous event that I attended that the devastation that has been caused to those sectors, and the fact that those utilities now need support from the government. We do have products designed specifically for both water utilities and electric utilities. And that the final thing that I would also say here is that, we really have to, to look at resilience building in a very broad sense, not just the financial aspect, but even the physical part of resilient building. And I'm pleased to see that the government has actually, or will be establishing, what is referred to as the National Reconstruction and Resilience Authority, which hopefully will certainly going to help to provide that dedicated attention to building the country back better and positioning it in a lot better shape in the event, for example, that Jamaica were to be impacted by such events in the future.
Thanks for that clarification about the different levels of coverage and different products, especially for the utilities. That's important. That I wasn't aware of that. So I appreciate that update and information, Isaac. And
Marla,
yes,
I would love to use this opportunity to make some connections here.
Yeah, please.
And to say why this conversation is so important. You know, and this my thinking here is seeded by something that Isaac just pointed out. When you buy insurance for your house against fire, you may or may not get a fire, you know.
Right.
By the time you sell the house, you may never have a fire. In the Caribbean, we know that you are going to get a hurricane.
Yes.
Might be next year, might be 12 years' time, but you are going to be impacted.
100%.
So there's no avoiding the cost.
Mm-hmm.
There is no taking the risk, taking the chance that you will end up not having, if you have insurance, that you won't pay anything. So each of these countries is going to have to bear the cost of a hurricane.
Right.
The question only is whether you want to bear the cost by paying the premiums on an annual basis or by paying it all at once when the hurricane hits and you don't have the capacity to pay it. So that is why this discussion is important. And to say how much the cost is, I want to take us back to a report that CAPRI did for the Caribbean Development Bank about a decade ago. The Caribbean contains most of the countries that are in the top 10 most indebted countries in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And why is that? The work that CAPRI did, Caribbean Policy Research Institute, the think tank that I work for, identified that very little of the debt that these countries accumulated had to do with housekeeping deficits. It wasn't because they continually didn't have enough tax revenue to pay for their wage bills and to pay for keeping the street lights on. Most of the debt was associated with the cost of recovery from natural disasters. And you could see it on the chart bump up every time a hurricane hit the region.
Yes.
So the source of the indebtedness and therefore the deep inability to meet the public service needs and development needs of our people comes from the fact that we inadequately prepare fiscally for the hurricanes that we are inevitably going to get.
Right. And we have the tools available as Isaac outlined.
Precisely.
To ensure that we have the resources. Now, a few things you all both raised. One is climate justice, which is we could probably talk for about a week about climate justice, right? And so we won't get into the meaning that, as Isaac pointed out, we didn't cause this problem in terms of the amount of storms and the intensity of these storms, yet we are the ones who have to continuously grapple with it. So we park that issue aside for the moment. But Damien, your point is well made that this is an inevitability. These natural disasters will happen, whether it's even just rain, excess rain. In Trinidad, where I'm from, we don't need hurricanes hardly ever hit Trinidad because we're one of the furthest eastern countries and southern as well. But sometimes it's just rain. And there's massive flooding. And I know that CCRIF has made payouts to Trinidad and Tobago because of that. And your point is well made as well, Damien, about the level of debt that we take on in order to build back better. Now, we pointed out earlier, $500 million that Jamaica has been able to raise against estimated damages of about $8 billion so far. So we have a hole of at least $7.5 billion US dollars. Damien, I want to ask you the same question I asked Isaac. around what would you have liked to see Jamaica do differently, apart from having more coverage? Is there anything you would have liked to see Jamaica do differently in facing these inevitable crises?
Okay, well, so we haven't absorbed yet all of the lessons of Melissa.
Right.
And so I'll have a lot more to say on this, when we have the same conversation in a year's time. But preliminarily, the governments of the region need to recognize the point about inevitability and just having more coverage so that the payouts can be greater, so that the payouts can be commensurate with the level of damage.
Yes.
So that's point number one. Point number two, greater use in the region and even in Jamaica's case of cat bonds, again, to get more automatic money flowing in.
Yes.
A third area that I think does not receive sufficient attention is the relief part of it. So the catastrophe hits, lots of services are destroyed, including telecommunications. And you have a whole flood of money and relief in kind coming in. And you need to get it from the various places it's coming from to the people that need it. That is inevitably going to be chaotic.
Yes.
Because, that cliche now of building the plane while flying it, comes to bear. Many different channels, many organizations. So you can't be confident that the money and the relief is being distributed in the most efficient way and getting to the greatest need. It's sort of, everybody's doing whatever they can.
They can at that moment, yeah.
So we do need to pay attention, again, given the inevitability of being able to take advantage of this, of establishing what are the channels through which we want relief to flow, set those up ahead of time.
Yes.
So everybody sort of knows what to do, where to put their resources, how it is going to get, how we're going to identify the greatest need. So it is being done in the most efficient way and in the least corrupt way.
Well, corrupt or ad hoc.
You can't start thinking about that after the hurricane hits.
Yeah.
So everybody needs to put that in place now.
I agree with you, Damien. It sounds to me like we need what people normally call a playbook, and or a manual of how to deal with this. And I think it needs to start with, and Cayman is a beautiful example. If my memory serves me correct, I think it's in May of every year they do their hurricane preparation month. And so they trim trees, they clear gullies, and they do drills in schools, they go to the supermarket and they stock up on their hurricane supplies. But taking it a step further to your point, when it does happen, what are the triggers? What are the things, and including the relief and the donations that come from bilateral partners and the diaspora, other countries in the Caribbean? We need to almost have a system and a process in place so that these things you flick a switch almost. And I know that sounds like I'm oversimplifying it and being utopic, but
it's true.
Exactly. That's the feeling I get as well.
Here's an example. And this is not a criticism of the Jamaican government, but after the hurricane hit, then they set up an official government website that individuals can contribute money to support the relief effort. Every country should have that website set up already.
Yes.
So you don't wait until the disaster to contract somebody and then to test it,
Yes.
So all of those things have to be put in place and be in place on a constant basis.
And on an annual basis, we revise for the test, right? Yep. I feel like that's what we also need to do, because there are little ones being born every day who need to be trained when they get to a certain age. And I want to commend Cayman for the way that they do their hurricane preparedness around, I think it's May of every year. So that's what I would have liked to see. And I agree with you fully in terms of what, we could or should do better. We have a lot of questions coming in that I feel like will be very relevant to the discussion we're having. So one of the first question I'm seeing here on my screen is, Isaac, the audience wants to know if the Cayman Islands participates in CRIF.
Yes, absolutely. Cayman Islands has been a member of CRIF from inception, from 2007.
Well, it was Hurricane Ivan that gave birth to CRIF, and Hurricane Ivan is probably the worst hurricane ever to affect Cayman from my recollection. So it makes sense that they're with you from inception.
Well,
so that's very good news.
Yes, along with, of course, Grenada. But to also say that that CRIF is actually established as a captive insurance company in the Cayman Islands as well. And I know in speaking to the authorities in the Cayman Islands, very often one of the things that comes out is that they're really pleased with how CRIF works. The fact that CRIF has gotten so much international attention, and it has also been good for the jurisdiction as well. So I think it would have been very unfortunate if
they were not part. Yeah. Yeah, but I want to pick up on this issue of 1.44 is the total amount that you are insured, that you have insured.
Correct.
And we have Jamaica, an estimate of about 7.5 billion of a whole, if you will. And Damien's point that this is where most of the debt that we see in countries that are over indebted in small island developing states, this is where it comes from. I have a question for you, Isaac. If more countries in the Caribbean and elsewhere, there's one just like you inspired the Pacific countries to create their version of a CRIF, by the way. But if more countries were to participate and buy insurance coverage for various perils, as you put it, would that mean that the overall cost of coverage declines? Are there any benefits of scale that you can derive if more countries were to avail of your insurance services?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, that's the beauty of risk pooling. So CRIF, from day one, we established as a risk pool facility where you pool the risk of several countries into one insurance vehicle. Now, and of course, because of diversification, it certainly helps to reduce the cost. The reality is that while you may end up having a hurricane hitting a country every year, or maybe once in every 2 years, it is not likely that you'll find one hurricane hitting all the countries at the same time. So that certainly helps a lot. But in the question of scale, yes, so absolutely, as we have more members, it of course introduces even more diversification of that risk. And so it helps, in terms of reducing the cost, both from the risk perspective as well as the perspective of economic cost.
Sounds like you try to do a merger with the Pacific Group.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, sorry. What was your question, Damien?
I was saying that sounds like, given your answer, it sounds like you should try to do a collaboration or a merger with the Pacific Risk Insurance Facility.
Well, interesting you saying that, because we do have a collaboration going with all the risk pools. As I've already said, CRIF was actually the first. And by the way, we call ourselves, to make the distinction from regular insurance companies, we are development insurance companies. All right, because on the one hand, very similar, for example, to what the World Bank does, or CDB. On the one hand, for example, the World Bank, they make products available to their member countries through concessional financing, grants, and so on. But they're also involved in helping to build resilience, build capacity. And this is very much the same thing that CRIF is doing. On the one hand, by providing these products, we help to strengthen financial resilience, but we're also just contributing to the overall resilience. We have a very well, put together technical assistance program that we make available to the region, offering, for example, scholarships. I think CRIF is probably one of the leading scholarship providers now in the region. A lot of people may not be aware of that. We also
congratulations.
We also have a very well put together internship program where we have a lot of young people coming out of university, and we're able to deploy them in different organizations throughout the region, all in the interest of building their own capacity while we're also contributing to the respective organization. And we also offer small grants to community-based organization to help them build resilience. But to your point, so in terms of the risk pools, apart from the one in the Pacific, we also have the African Risk Capacity, and we have the more recently established one in Southeast Asia called CCRIF. And we have actually started a collaboration among ourselves to see how we can bring our collective resources to enhance our ability to be able to do more for our respective members. So yes, indeed, we do have that collaboration going.
This is fantastic. I'm very happy to hear this, Isaac. I really am. Congratulations. And I hope that more countries will now pay attention and take on more coverage with you. We have a question from the audience for Damien. How do you think that the recovery from Melissa will affect and cause changes to and enforcement of the building codes in Jamaica? Did Damien hear me? He seems a bit stuck on my end. Did we lose Damien?
Yeah.
You're back?
Yeah, I was saying it's a really good question because the answer is not straightforward.
Okay.
The main reason why people live in low quality housing. All right, let me try one more time. The main reason why people live in substandard housing, skirt
Okay, it seems we lost Damien. I know that
Yeah.
we're having some internet issues in Jamaica, so we understand. We want to give one more try.
Yeah, one more try. Yeah, the main problem is not so much a failure of enforcement or not knowing the rules. It's because people are poor.
Absolutely.
So they build poor quality housing because that's what they can afford on vulnerable land, because that land is free.
Yeah.
So you can't regulate your way out of poverty.
No, you have to lift people out of poverty first, and then you can regulate them in terms of the quality of housing. That is a reality across the Caribbean. Yeah. How do you get over that?
You can't force people to live above their means.
Yeah. Yeah,
so
I mean,
it's a tricky thing to navigate.
Yes, and I mean, some people might point to the solution of, government housing and governments providing housing for the vulnerable, which in many countries in the Caribbean, and I know Jamaica does that too, but more so in the urban areas as opposed to the rural areas, where people generally, if they can't afford housing, they tend to go to the rural areas, which, by the way, is some of the most heavily affected areas from Hurricane Melissa. Okay, so there's a question that came in about, does CCRIF provide coverage for households? My understanding is you do not, right, Isaac? Just looking for clarification there.
Well, I would say that this is a very timely question.
Is it?
Because we actually in the process, but working along with the Munich Climate Insurance Initiative, we're about to launch what is called a livelihood protection policy. It's more what they call a micro. So this is different. So this is not targeting the sovereign level, which is government, but targeting individuals, but working with the insurance companies in the region who would be the ones essentially selling the product, but using CRIF's modeling capability and what you call calculating agency services to make the product available. So what it means is that an individual, and again, we're really targeting, the individual. So it could be, if the fisher folk, it could be farmers, it could be seasonal workers, could be tourism workers, and so on, can actually go to an insurance company and purchase a policy. That would provide that sort of protection. So in the event that you have a Melissa again, potentially you get a payout, which would certainly help you. So yes, indeed, we are actually working currently, and we will be doing a launch. In fact, I think as recent as 2 weeks from now. In fact, the intention, just to let you know, Marla, we were supposed to have done that launch a couple of weeks ago, but again, because of Melissa, we had to change plans. And in fact, we've had to change the whole plan because we're no longer doing it as an in-person event, but it's going to take the form of a webinar. But the important thing is that the microinsurance product will be available very soon, and individuals will be able to avail themselves of it.
That's fantastic. I mean, I think that's music to our ears. And thanks to the audience member who asked that question, because I just assumed that it was just for countries. Going back to Damien, so you have just about 7 or 8 billion that we know of now in terms of damages that we don't have funding for. And we have, Jamaica has, they brought their debt to GDP from about 2011 or so of about 150% debt to GDP to a more recent number of around 58 to 60% debt to GDP. 7.5 billion in unfunded damages. And then you have, for example, $6 billion in reserves that Jamaica has. It looks like we lost Damien there. The question was going to be, what is the extent of the debt accumulation we can expect to see Jamaica take on now? Or will they dig into some of this 6 billion in reserves? I see Damien coming back. He's here.
Yeah.
You heard the question?
Well, I can piece together the question from the beginning and the end.
Right. So what's the level of debt we think Jamaica is going to take on, and will they go and dig into this $6 billion of foreign exchange reserves?
Well, let me answer the second part first. It doesn't make sense to go into the foreign exchange reserves because that is not a savings account for this purpose.
Absolutely not. Mm-hmm.
Foreign exchange reserves at the central bank are there for the purpose of dealing with secular, non-trend demands for foreign exchange. So they can use it to stabilize the foreign exchange market during a catastrophe, but not to take it to spend on goods and services. So let's leave that aside.
Right.
But the fortunate thing about, again, it looks like we're going to end where we started, because you spoke about the fiscal improvements that Jamaica has undertaken over the last decade. And it now means that with our debt to GDP ratio, close to 60%, it means that Jamaica has borrowing capacity,
right,
to be able to deal with a disaster like this, and borrowing capacity on relatively cheap terms, given the low existing debt and given our current sovereign credit ratings. So this is where you get the payoff to good fiscal management.
Right.
When
you have a piggy bank that you can break open.
Exactly. When COVID happens, when Melissa happens, this is where you get the real payoff.
Right. That's something that's, I think, very important. We have, sorry to use a technical term, but we have what's called pro-cyclical fiscal policy in general in the Caribbean. What does that mean? It means in times of plenty, we spend plenty. And when we don't have a lot of money, we cut back and we, ban we belly kind of thing, as they say, and tighten our belts. When in fact it should be the reverse. When we have plenty, in times of plenty, we should save it. Therefore, when things are rough, Hurricane Melissa hits you, you then have a piggy bank that you can crack open and you have something there. It's a lesson to all Caribbean countries, all Caribbean governments, that if you had done what Jamaica did, you can be in a much better position, like Jamaica is right now. We have 9 minutes left. So I want to wrap up by asking both of you to give in a nutshell, share your views on what went right and what we need to do better in the future, not necessarily specific only to Jamaica, but what we need to do better also as a region. Isaac, let's go with you first.
Right. Okay, good. So, let me first of all say that, the Caribbean has led with the establishment of CRIF SPC. And I really want to, again, commend the heads of government at the time in 2004 that decided, look, enough was enough. A crisis was a terrible thing to waste. Let us do something. Let us start doing something. And that action has led to CRIF, which is today considered to be the leading development insurer in the world. It has the biggest parametric insurance globally, right? And, we are doing so much to see how we can provide more protection to our governments. And as I explained a while ago, we're also working to see how we could, even protect directly individuals.
Right.
But the reality, Marla, is that unfortunately, we will continue to face the consequences of climate change. We already know, and that is a point that Damien himself has said many times, we know the disasters will come. So we don't have any control over that. What we have control over is how we prepare. The quality of our preparation is going to be very, very important in helping to close that protection gap. I would certainly like to see all countries in the region adopt a disaster risk policy framework, as has been done in the case of Jamaica, that actually includes, the risk layering approach. And, to their credit, I know a number of countries are doing really good work, including Barbados. As you know, Barbados has actually been very aggressive in terms of trying to ensure that they put disaster risk framework in place. But the other thing that I want to say is that while we know that CRIFs are working well, we need to take more advantage of it in terms of scaling up. And that point has already been made in terms of increasing coverage, adopting some of the instruments, the products that I mentioned a while ago. I have already drawn attention to the microinsurance. But there's also a possibility that CRIF, maybe working with along with other partners, can do a regional cat bond. We believe that we might be able to offer a cost-effective solution in that place. But the other point that I really want to emphasize, and I think it's a point that Damien touched on, the whole question of contingency planning. Again, we already know these disasters will come. We cannot start preparing or planning when they happen or during the time, that you're supposed to be recovering. Yeah. So we need to anticipate, and that is where the whole issue of anticipatory action, anticipatory financing has become very important. You need to anticipate what needs to be done. For simple things, and I come from a disaster, I come from a public finance background, having to deal and interpret public finance laws. And one of the things I will tell you, our public finance legislation in many of our countries are still archaic. We need to understand that the actions that are required to be done immediately in the post-disaster event, right, is not the norm. And so our Finance Act needs to be modified to take account of those situations, to be able to give government some flexibility to be able to respond better to the disasters. The other point, the final point I would also make is we need to improve our coordination within the region itself. I think the establishment of CRIF is an excellent and a very successful story of coordination, but I think there's a lot more that we can do as a region. As we've already established, these disasters will come, but we, as a region, we need to see how we can prepare even better by determining, for example, working with the various regional organizations, whether we talk about the CDMAs, the CRIF, the Caribbean Development Bank, as well as the 5Cs and other agencies. We need to coordinate our action so we can come up with a more comprehensive response, to those disasters that are waiting for us.
Yep.
There's room
and they will come.
And they will come. So we've established that. And what I would say is that from a CRIF perspective, we will certainly continue to do what we need to do. We are even prepared to explore the possibility of looking at non-insurance products just to help, to bolster, to increase the protection that is required, to our member countries. So we are prepared to be very flexible on that front. So in some ways, I would say it's an exciting time for us, but because we see the opportunities that exist, the things that can be done, but I think a bit more collaboration is certainly going to help, not only within the region, but even with the donor communities. This is not the time for the donors to turn their back, right? And say we have done enough.
Yeah.
Because the reality is that the list is long. The depth of the problem that we are working is significant, right?
Absolutely.
I know that we've established, there's been the establishment of the Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage. I recently attended some events where they actually, for example, launched a call for proposal. But in there, there isn't any clear-cut opportunities for, let's say, a CRIF to make an application. We need to find a way of being able to access some of those resources to be able, to help our member countries, even if it's just helping them, to pay the premium so that they can scale up the coverage to the required $150 million per peril per country. So there's a lot to be done, and of course, happy to continue that conversation.
Thank you, Isaac. Yeah, the donors or the global north, let's just say, need to do a lot better. Damien, quickly, can you give us your take on what can be done better next time?
Yeah, listen, it won't take long because of Isaac's excellent summary a while ago. The only thing I'd add to that, emphasize that one of the things we have really done well is to have CRIF in the first place, and Jamaica's improved fiscal management, and that its entire resilience stack of cat bond and catastrophe clauses and insurance. So that's what they've done well. What they can do better is more of the same, since the funding is inadequate even after that.
Yeah.
So a bigger insurance pool, and governments recognizing that they need to take advantage of it more resilient public infrastructure, public economic infrastructure, roads, bridges, facilities, telecommunications. And as we've mentioned several times already, putting in place a relief architecture so that the relief can happen.
Okay, I think we lost Damien, but I'm gonna go ahead and wrap up because we are out of time. So, gentlemen, I really can't thank you both enough for taking the time to come on this show and for sharing your insights and ideas with the audience. This has been a truly uplifting conversation. Next, you will see on your screen the QR codes that will take you to the Government of Jamaica's portal to make a donation to their relief effort. Also see the portal, a QR code to make a donation directly to the St. James and Westmoreland zones, which are some of the worst affected areas in Jamaica. And finally, you will see the QR code, which will take you to Sean Paul's foundation that I happen to be supporting, and he is matching everything that you donate today up to $50,000 US. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you so much to the audience for your support. We look forward to seeing you for future editions of Finding Our Freedom here on CMR TV in Cayman Islands. Thank you. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody.